Well, firstly, I'm Diane Burkinshaw. I'm the Deputy Head of the Academy of Sport and Physical Activity, so that's my kind of nominated role at the moment in sport. And these two are my colleagues from sport, so if I'm going to get any hassle, I know where it's going to come from. But that's not really why I'm here. My background is teacher education, so I spent 23 years basically working in partnership with education on secondary teacher training. And sad or not, I'm absolutely passionate about assessment. And my own doctorate, so my doctorate education, is all about assessment and assessment for learning. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, where my background is. So obviously there's been a huge explosion around assessment in secondary practice since, 2000 really. And now we're seeing a lot of that coming through to higher education. So that's why I'm doing this particular session, okay? If you want to ask any questions at any point, please do. And I am very aware that I do often speak quite quickly, as my colleagues will affirm, so if I do start to go too fast, just slow down, okay? What I'm going to try to do in the session is two things. One is to talk about assessment for learning, and the, if you like, the underpinning pedagogy, the theory, the philosophy, but not heavy, I promise you, as to why it is part of a teaching and learning strategy. It's not just something that's bolt-on or separate. So that's the first part. But that should be about a third of the time. The rest of the time, the 2/3 of the time, is actually looking at different assessment for learning strategies and tools, things you could put into practice, or maybe you might be surprised to think that you're actually doing without realising, or maybe this is an area that you're really keen on and you already know lots about this area, and these are the things that are very simple and you already do them anyway. So that's kind of what the structure of the session is about. Welcome, come join us. All right, okay. So, level learning outcomes, as you would expect with any session on assessment for learning. So first we're going to define the nature and purpose of assessment in everyday practice. What I'm meaning by everyday practice is not the stuff you do at the end of the modules, not the stuff that you do as a particular thing for assessment. It's something that you just do as part of your normal teaching and learning practice with your students, whether it's in seminars, workshops, tutorials, lectures or whatever. We're going to have a quick go at defining key terms of assessment of learning and assessment for learning, because you can't really look at assessment for learning without obviously considering it in the context of assessment of learning. And then we're going to discuss and share some AFL practices. So what I need you to do is to get into small groups. So I was going to suggest we went into groups of, say, a group of 3 and a group of 4, but I do want to split my colleagues up if I can. Is that okay? So if one group would come around it, not that because you've never talked to them.
Just like I've not got hot drink in my hands.
You go, because I don't know how to make it.
Tell you what, put your feet up.
No, alright.
There you go.
I don't like these chairs. I don't like them too.
Okay, so if you have a 3 and a 4, that would be fantastic. Anybody need a shove?
A shove. Wheeling people around. Yes, that'd be handy for a naughty student though. Just like steer them out of the situation. Yeah.
Okay, what I'd like you to do, I've brought flip chart, but the paper is going to be a little big actually with these because we haven't got solid desks, so I will just do some tearing in the corner. But what I'd like you to do is briefly in your group, so I do need you to separate, I want you to discuss what you understand at this moment in time around the term of assessment of learning and assessment for learning. When you've had the discussion, and please make sure you have the discussion first, I then want you to summarise your understanding of each of the terms in one sentence. So one sentence for AFL and one sentence for AOL, okay? And when you finish that, if you could just write those sentences down onto the piece of paper that I will provide you. And I'm going to give you about 7 minutes to do the whole task. Is that okay? 7? 7, yes. Exactly 7. Okay?
To see what they can actually, just to see what they can do, what they're supposed to be able to do. What they demonstrate.
Presumably it's towards the end of the talk.
It doesn't necessarily have to be knowledge, does it? Because you can check whether they can apply something, not just whether they know something.
Well, no, both can have something.
But it's just
checking. One is more kind of viewed as being a journey.
They can do
before
better learning outcomes.
Continuing assessment of learning is a bit more fun.
Yeah,
and
it's about
That's how I practice better.
Whereas the for learning, I guess, is the assessment actually is a way of helping them learn as well as looking at their attitudes.
That was easy.
I'll put that briefly into
Well, did you say
the assessment of set criteria and competencies, usually at the end. You want them to learn first and then you want to check what they're it's assessment of learning, that's of some stuff, I would say. But whereas the assessment for learning includes just like feed forward.
I really that kind of semi-digest.
Yeah, so you're giving them feedback to improve their future.
Yes.
There you go, you've got your hand on or volunteer.
need to see them? So you're trying to condense your discussion to 2 single sentences of learning, for learning. So,
Assessment of learning.
Yes.
by assessment of the assessment. Is it
Yes, but I had to answer questions like an interview months ago, didn't I? So I should know some of it. That's why I'm getting quite now.
Yes. Yeah. It's assessment for assessing. Don't use the word assessing, can we?
I thought they're checking off.
If I was your student, I'd almost be inspired to do assessment for this. She said that to me. Almost. Yeah, but it's
Changing
students aren't they?
intonation to make it more interesting.
How would you?
The students have left. Checking off.
Yeah.
The assessment of learning is
Yes, whether criteria or competencies or something like and all competencies.
I was very
Make it very long sentence.
Well, that is it.
took a photograph of
We have some learning outcomes, we'll check that in.
Okay, you've got about 3 minutes left.
Assessment for learning works.
2 minutes left. One sentence for assessment of learning, one for assessment for learning.
In a way, it's the same as the assessment, you've got a bit more on it, so you still check whether they can meet the criteria, but using it as a way to inform future teaching. So is it? But you're not necessarily
How are we getting on with the sentence?
To inform learning to enable them to meet check criteria.
What does inform learning?
I don't know.
Assessment for
That's right.
Or is that more for sort of longer journey? A learning journey, so it's like setting tasks to help students along that learning journey.
Yeah, that sounds too much.
Does it? What assessment?
I'm very, just a politician.
Oh, that's last minute.
Elements of journey.
Yeah.
They're very much ones that
Very black and white.
Yeah.
No, it's very bright.
So, what we
So you said the use of formative and summative
Something
tasks.
has been gradual, progressive, I think, is really important as well. Is that kind of
To help students.
assessment
It
process?
provides like it's the feed forward thing, isn't it?
Feedback.
It's not just feed forward, because it's about the students self-evaluating where they are at as well.
Yeah.
So it's use of formative and summative tasks.
Enables self-reflection and improvement.
Graduate is learn, to help the students. Help with future learnings, or to
That takes a student on a learning journey.
Student-centred.
a learning journey is a horrible phrase.
On journey.
Okay, time's up. Okay, who found that easy?
No.
Who found it harder than you expected to find
The
it?
first one was easy, the second one was much harder.
Okay, right, what we'll do is we'll hear what you've got to say. So what we'll do is we'll start with this group. What did you have for assessment of learning? Was it all for this one? Okay, what did you learn?
I'll hold it.
Hold it up so that it's considered.
It's the checking of whether students have met the learning outcomes, criteria or competencies.
Hey, does that mirror what you got? What did you guys get for assessment of learning?
Assessment of learning is an informed judgment by a lecturer or educator.
Okay.
It's no policy, right?
That's all right. And what did you have for assessment for learning? We'll come back this way.
Assessment for learning is a gradual student-centred process or approach.
In other words, we can finish out the sentence really.
No.
But it's hard, isn't it? The point is, and we've got to keep quite quick to time, but the point is it's not easy, is it?
No.
What did you have for assessment for learning?
The use of formative and summative tasks that take a student on a journey of self-improvement.
Okay. So, what I'm going to show you is what the literature suggests they are. I'm not going to give you a right or wrong, because that's not the point of this workshop. And at least nobody got it the wrong way round. Which has happened first time I did this. So, condensing assessment of learning. The key literature around assessment for learning started with Williams and Black in 1998 with Inside the Black Box. What I've done is I've collated together some of their definitions and some of the assessment reform group as well. But knowing that this is a workshop, I'm not going to spend too long on who said what and where, it's just a collated version. So, assessment of learning. See if this mirrors your discussion. It tends to be summative. It's carried out periodically, i.e. the end of a module, a year, a phase of learning. The tutor undertakes this kind of assessment to judge how well the learner is performing, so that's similar to what we've got. Conclusions will probably be reported in terms of grades or marks, or even levels, and these may be set alongside national standards so that a learner, university or tutor can evaluate their own performance against that of others. So at our most extreme, we know we have our data sets around good honours degrees, and they all feed into ultimately what we get on the KISS data and the Unistats data, and where we end up in the times and all those kind of things. So it's about reporting something, it's about making a judgment, making a grade. And obviously in the university context, it's usually ultimately around the degree classification, but it can be around the level 4, level 5, it can be just within the module. Because the results of assessment of learning are shared with other people, and you have issues of validity and reliability, which are paramount, that's where moderation comes in, of course, that's why we have to have our externals, etc. There's also an important balance though, between making assessments that are rigorous yet manageable, and that's the thing that we all struggle with in trying to meet a 3-week turnaround and designing them in such a way that we are testing what we said we'd test, making a judgment based on what we said we'd make the judgment on, but also equally being able to get home at a reasonable time of night and having a life outside of this place. But that's where assessment of learning sits as a definition. Assessment for learning. Okay, so Black and William. In this paper, they were talking about assessment of all activities undertaken by teachers, and please read teachers writ broad, so teachers in all sectors, and their students in assessing themselves, which provide information to be used as feedback to modify the teaching and learning activities in which they're engaged. So that's a general definition of assessment overall, the nature and purpose of it. But assessment for learning in particular is the process of seeking and interpreting evidence for use by learners and their teachers, for our purpose, tutors, to decide where the learners are in their learning, where they need to go, and how best to get there. And I think the fundamental difference between the two it's not about whether it's a test or an exam, or whether it's a coursework, or whether it's called formative or it's called summative. It's actually about what's the purpose that you put the assessment outcomes to. So what you gather as a result of doing your piece of assessment, how do you use that in order to do something else? So while you were doing that task, rather than me just stand there and read it out to you, I came round all the groups. I was listening to what you were saying. I was clocking who was very keen, knew straight away. So already I have formed some impressions around your knowledge base around assessment for learning in a way that I wouldn't have been able to if I'd have just stood there and done a transmission model of teaching. But the key thing, if you take nothing away from today's session, it's about the purpose to which you put the assessment data that you find out. Now, I'm going to use my data, very informal data, in order to move this session forward. If you were doing a formal exam, which had, for the students, a very high stakes riding on it, then that data information would probably feed into, ultimately, their degree classification. So you've got those two extremes. But the tools that we use, so teacher observation, question and answer, all those tools, exams, tests, they could be used for either purpose to a greater or lesser degree. So the difference is not about the what you do, it's the what you do with it afterwards. Okay, so if you're going to really distill something down, that's absolutely fundamental to what we're doing today. Okay. You will have heard, and I heard you say it, assessment for learning is also known as summative assessment, of learning summative assessment, for learning is formative. But it's actually not quite as simple as that. Because how many of you, for example, either as a tutor in university or as a learner in your schools, at some point did a mock exam, the exam itself had a summative grade at the end of it, and then your teacher brought the papers out, and then you all went through for the next couple of weeks, probably particularly in maths and science, and went through why you got the answers wrong and what a model answer should look like. So in that case, you're using some summative data in a formative manner. So yes, there are similarities between formative and summative and of learning and for learning, but actually sometimes people say it's exactly that and it's exactly that. So it was nice to see in, I think it was in, which group we got formative and summative in at the same time? Yeah, that was nice to see in there. Okay. Right.
That's a really long sentence though. Really
yeah, well that's why I didn't talk about it. The reason for asking you to try and put it in the one sentence is because it's almost impossible to do that. Okay? Everybody thinks they know. I say to you, AFL, yeah, I know that is. But actually what you know, what you know, what you know, what you know, what I know, could all be similar or ever so slightly different. Okay? Or different but the same. So I think just doing that task really does bring that out. Okay. So, characteristics of assessment for learning. I think this is the most important part of it. Assessment for learning is embedded in a view of teaching and learning of which it is an essential part. So if you hear people saying to you, oh, I'm going to do an assessment for learning task, oh, I'm going to do a formative assessment, and I'm going to book it in for weeks 7, 9 and 11, it kind of jars really, because assessment for learning should actually inform the whole of your teaching and learning strategy. It's what you do in the classroom, it's the actual practice that you're doing with students at all times. So yes, you can do a bolt-on formative task in week 6 if you want to do a mini test along the way. But is that really true assessment for learning? Probably not. You've probably been told by the university you can only have 2 or 3 assessments, so you're slipping one in on the quiet and you put in a few little marks to it. So it's not actually assessment for learning at all, it's not really formative at all, it's actually just a low stakes summative assessment because it's only got a few marks. Okay, it involves sharing learning goals with learners. If the learners don't know what you want them to learn, how on earth will they ever know that they've learned it? And we all do it, I know, when we've written our module descriptors and we go off to validation and we spend hours and hours getting our module learning outcomes right. But hand on heart, who really thinks about their learning outcomes in every single session that they teach? And if you do, fabulous, brilliant.
Absolutely.
Some don't. Okay? Some people know what they want people to learn, they've got the learning outcomes here, so you've thought about them. How many of you share them explicitly in every session that you teach?
Depends on the context of the session.
Okay.
Coming into the university as a non-academic, I've looked at my module, in my module handbook, that I obviously have nothing to do with, it's been written and submitted, and a lot of those learning outcomes I don't understand. So if I don't understand them, I'm not quite sure how my level 4s are going to understand them. So I think actually sharing individual week-by-week goals is even more important.
Absolutely.
Because those handbooks they're written by academics.
For academics.
For academics, really.
And probably taken, to be fair, from ultimately the descriptive, model descriptive.
Just to think the object of the handbook, doesn't it? Because the handbook is meant to be student-facing, but the descriptive is something to keep quality up.
Anyway, so I'm just very conscious of time because I don't want to just do this bit and then not give you the other material, so I'm going to kind of move you on a little quicker than I would like, so sorry about that. But sharing learning goals is really, really important. So we've all thought about them to a greater or lesser degrees, we've shared them to a greater or lesser degrees. How many people return to them at different points throughout the session to see to what extent individual, so no, the whole group is learning first, that the group is learning. Some of you? Brilliant.
Probably not. At the end, do you check whether they're probably...
At the end?
Yeah.
What about in the middle?
No, probably not in the middle.
Okay. And how many of you, if I were to come and watch one of your sessions from outside, and I were to stand by the door, and as your students walked out, I was to randomly say to them, what were the learning outcomes of the session, and did you achieve them? How many of you are confident that every one of your 30 learners, and mind you 180 learners, how many are confident that you would know that they could do that? You might not know that they've achieved them, but are many of you confident that you think they could do that? Okay, we'll test that. Okay? But every learner counts. And then the final really difficult question is, that's about the students knowing. How many of you are confident that if I stop you walking out of the session and said, can you please tell me how Damien Kingsbury got in that session, to what extent he achieved the learning outcomes? So I just pick one random student. How many of you would feel confident as the person tutoring that you would be able to do that? And if you can, what are you doing in this session? Okay, that's where we need to be going to. So the learners need to know what they want to learn, what they're meant to learn. They're also meant to know whether they've learnt it or not, or to what degree they've learnt it or not. Okay, assessment for learning also helps learners to know and recognise the standards they're aiming for. Links back to the first one. So it's not just about what you want them to learn, but to what degree, what makes, if you like, a good piece of work, what makes a weak piece of work, albeit all of it is moving towards the intended learning. It involves the learners in peer and self-assessment. Okay, I'm happy to email this round, by the way, if people are emailing writing, but I'm very happy to email this round. It will be good, I think, on the site as well. But you need to involve the learners. Assessment isn't something that we do to people. It's something that we do with our learners. Okay? Now, some contexts are challenging. So if you've got a lecture room with 180 compared to a seminar group of 20, what you can do in that context will vary. And I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that you will know all 180 students, exactly where they've learned, what progress they've made in your session. But you should have some idea of where the group have gone to, or half the group, or maybe smaller groups, okay, but not, I've gone in, I've taught, I've worked really hard, I'm teaching. It doesn't matter if you're learning, but I'm working hard because I'm a good teacher. I'm teaching, I'm achieving my objectives. And actually, if you think about assessment for learning, it's about outcomes. It's about the learning outcomes. Has some change happened in your learners as a result of engaging with you in that period of learning that you've been with them, whether it's an hour or 3 months or 10? Okay, it provides feedback. Now feedback's fine because you can tell people what they got wrong, but that wouldn't be assessment for learning. Assessment for learning generates feedback which leads the learners to recognising not only what they need, what their next steps are, but also how to take them. So you might have a piece of work where you write down and say, you didn't use enough literature. Let's use it very simply. You didn't use enough literature. Next time you need to engage with the literature more. Okay, that's telling them, recognising what their next steps are, as in they need to engage with the literature more. Does it help them know how to take their steps? So again, you need to think about how. So what would the how be for that? Perhaps what you could put in there is a specific target, which relates to a particular task linked to the literature, or it could be that then informs the next session that you do with the group in the next context that you get them. So for those of you that were in the quickfire session we were in this morning, where it was Sue Becky who did a presentation on the 3 C's, and she talked about how to engage students with research, that might be the next task you would send them on to. Okay? It promotes confidence that every learner can improve. We know that not every student coming to us is going to get first. We know that some students will achieve and leave with a third, but they will have made progress. So assessment for learning is around giving the students confidence that they can move from where they are, where they need to get to, and how to get there. And in that process, you're building confidence. And finally, it involves both the teacher and the learners reviewing and reflecting on assessment data. And ideally, that can be done together. Now, you're already thinking, okay, I've got a large group, how can I see all my individual students, one-on-one or 50 of them? Okay. But there are other ways of doing that, which is what I'm going to come to in the strategies later on. Okay. So they're the characteristics. So if you're really, really interested in assessment for learning, you need to be thinking of these characteristics every single time you plan and deliver and evaluate one of your taught sessions. You can't do it all in every one, but you should be mindful of what you're trying to achieve. Okay? And many of you may already be doing it. So on a day-to-day basis, simple things, learning outcomes made explicit and shared with students and revisited. Learner self-assessment in use, not just in week 7 when I'm doing a formative task, but also how can you set up tasks whereby you can give each other feedback. For example, we've already done one, very simple one today, in terms of the task you did, and you showed your sheets to each other. Very simple, very low level, but absolutely within that kind of approach to teaching and learning. And then the learners need to be engaged in their learning and given immediate feedback. Because what we're hoping to have is a shift from this to this. Now, being very aspirational here, not every learner will be that engaged every single session that they do, but that's what you're aiming for. That's what assessment for learning as a pedagogical strategy is all about. Okay, so probably the bit you really came for, some examples of practice. Now I would say these are begged, stolen and borrowed, devised, created, collated and acquired over the last years that I've been here. Some of them taken from, for example, the work we do around Teach First, some of them taken from the programmes we do with our PGC students, etc, etc, etc. And I've picked the ones that I think would be useful that we could use with our 18 plus learners. Clearly there are some strategies that are far more suitable with 11 plus learners, but I've taken those out. Okay. So, a full list of them. The ones in red are the ones that are on my slides. And I've put that as a key so that when you get the slides, you're not just looking for all the others. I do actually have all the others as well, but I just thought this is really only 45 minutes and I can't possibly give you all of that. Now, we have two ways of doing this. One is I can just keep putting them up, or we can talk through them. Or I could use a good assessment for learning task myself. And if you've been in smaller groups, so perhaps we could do it in a pair of 3, if that's okay. Inside each of the envelopes, and please don't open them yet, you will find copies of the slides that I've got coming up. I can give you more than one group, so there actually are 7 of them, so you can have to take away anyway. Okay, this is what I want you to do. Okay, so I'll just pull up the first one before you open your envelopes. Okay, this is the first one. It is in there somewhere. They're all in a random order. The only thing consistent in the envelopes is that the little key at the front is at the front of them all. I hope you've got good eyesight because they are a little bit small. But what I want you to do is talk with the people that you're working with, and I want you to categorise them all. So, on the outside of the envelope you need to stick your names. Inside the envelopes you will then find some coloured pieces of paper. Okay. On any of those that you think, this is a load of rubbish, Diane, I'm never going to use that, just stick me a red sticker, okay? Or you can just write on the back, it's entirely up to you, but red stickers are really helpful to me, for me to see how you're getting on. Any that you think, yeah, I either use them or I'll definitely use those, then it's kind of blue, but I'm calling it green, okay? Because I couldn't get the pure green ones. And any that you think, yeah, maybe possibly, not sure yet, that's my amber. So there's your traffic lights. Green, amber and red. Is that okay? If you use the stickers, why does that help me as your tutor? How is that helping me in terms of assessment for learning, rather than you just writing on them? Absolutely, I can see where you're at, see whether... And also, then what can I do next time with my session?
Modify it.
Modify, absolutely, because I know what's useful, what I think is wonderful and great, and you lot might be thinking, ooh, you know what, that's rubbish. So it's giving me some instant feedback as well. It's also giving you some instant feedback because you can be looking up, having a look at what everybody else is doing as well. Okay, so what I'd like us to do for the rest of the session, rather than me stand here and say, this is this one, this is this one, this is this one, I want you to go through with the people that are around you and look at them. If you're not sure about them, I will be walking around the room and listening and reading anyway. But if you have any questions about them, but I want you to categorise them, not likely to use, really, you know, rubbish, not going to use it. Possibly might use it, but not already using it. And either, yeah, definitely will use it, or I'm already using it. Okay? And these that you've got, I think there are a sample out of about 300 that I have. So I can give you a couple of envelopes if you want this. That's just a summary. Yeah. That's your summary one. So. No, you don't have to have a consensus. You might use it, you might not, and you might be thinking about it. Because then it helps me see exactly. Yeah, sorry, just to be clear, you don't have to reach consensus, so you could stick a red on and you could stick a green on, the same one. Okay, just make sure they're stuck on the back somewhere, so when I collect them,
Is it? Are we doing it for each bullet point?
You're reading each one, so each one, each card, so articulate the answer is one strategy, one thing.
Okay, so overall.
And what this does, it just explains what articulate your answer is. So on here you then find articulate your answer.
I've definitely used that already.
Yeah.
Which is in my planning. I've spent all summer reading assessment and learning books. That's also in my plans.
Double up. Yeah. There we go. I asked the question to Ruby's teacher, she's largely is that kind of whole line. When I want to speak, kind of over the years, entrench myself, I just need to hold on for 3 more seconds. The number of times as I've gone to respond or ask a question differently, I've been answered, someone starts to speak. So try and just hold on sort of painfully longer than I feel like I need to. And that's kind of almost that. Sort of.
Yes, and I think that makes that one slightly more high risk. Some students where they want their sound and talk.
I think
There's one you can do
more experience.
You make them all stand up and think, and then they all sit down.
I don't know if that works.
That's a great thing to do.
You don't have to choose any over others. That's fine, they're not sort of, this one's a better one and that's it.
I'm going to go with because I don't, it probably is in their plans and maybe not quite as explicitly. Yeah, so I took some assignment review.
To be honest,
So you,
I'll go on.
oh, you're right.
Yes, definitely. I suppose it's time limited, isn't it? That one.
I suppose that would be a good feedback. So this is just discussion.
Such as overlapping.
Yeah, just because it's a slight, because it's like, oh, that's yeah. Get to lots and lots of yeah.
So I guess I'm kind of a really big user of kind of quicker multiple sessions. So encourage students to bring whatever phone or device they've got. So yeah, by nature, yeah, alright, there are some multiple choice ones. Essentially just the frequency of stuff, especially when doing sessions.
Sometimes the right answer is
kind of more behavioural.
do you think about
some people won't think about questions and just ask them to it's got a factual answer and take it further. So if you want to ask them how often
it's an open question, even though it's
you might well,
it's a question that may lead to something else.
It could be this question, it could be close questions that you might just say it's nice to ask. That's why we do that.
Yeah.
So it's just being aware that there are totally different ones.
Yeah. Do you just say you think it's a or do you use
I would think that I would do that, but
now you're going to be aware of it, think about it.
Sitting in front of some students, you know, they go on to agree. I'd like to think that I could do that. Yes, definitely. I wouldn't always answer the question. If I get a question, I'd throw it back. Yeah.
It's when you don't know the answer.
Absolutely. One of the things in my head is it's a good idea to have a car park, isn't it? So if you get a question that you don't want to answer at that time, you park it and come back to it at the end. Never admit you didn't know.
So it's how do we identify what things we do well in practice during so the everything
I've got some activities around kind of criteria crunching as well, which so I will give them the criteria that I've written, but then get them to kind of do back to it so that they understand it, and then we'll agree on that criteria. Agree on
what's it related values
and then we agree on what that criteria is.
That's it, yeah.
Sits in with that, doesn't it? So I'm going to bring this in.
What do you do?
I will do sport business management as of a week on Tuesday. I have to say, I think some of the peer assessment, the peer review thing that David has done, that went a bit over my head.
Like I was saying, when I mentored, I said I'm not a big believer in advice from an opinion.
I've had different, some people said that to me, and other people said
there are two advice. One is walk into a room confident that you know more than the students do, because you always do. And the second is if you get asked a question that is a bit of a curveball or you don't really understand the question, you have to stop responses. What do you think? Or, you know, has anyone else got a view on it? And I'll pass it on to people who will go, don't understand the question, and then that person will reframe it. If you enough thinking time to not understand it.
I'm going to give it Amber. I know it's important.
Could write it into a book. It could be called What Do You Think? A Guide to Dealing with Students.
I get them to write whether they liked and didn't like and wants to know. It's very useful actually because it's anonymous and it's really quick.
sorry, and lots and lots of institutes around the world.
What I have done in the past is
yes, I definitely have
approaches. One is give a time.
What you just said, isn't it? Yeah.
Very similar asking what's name it, have students to look at and depersonalise it very intentionally, or they anonymously put a short piece of work around the room and then they go round these pieces of work and then they provide peer feedback and then who does it. So the logic being that rather than working in a pair for 45 minutes or whatever, swapping pieces of work with each other, you potentially 8, 9, 10 times one in the same period of time. So it's a little bit more service in the sense that some students will scan the code and some page 2 will put in as an exception. So yeah, so it's all the time. Yeah,
Promote questions, I would write some questions like that. Yeah. Well, the same as it is. But it could be different. Yeah. But I think I suppose I would hope the activities outside encourage and not be afraid of doing wrong.
Could be as simple as that. It might not be a good way to just that's
very much in mind.
I'm beginning to talk about using the cookies, but you've been in like here and they've got a sign saying how can we do today, and there's a green smiley face and a neutral face and a red and happy face, and the only feedback they get is that metric, good and different and bad. And I've actually used something similar to that, but again using the cookies and saying before you leave the room, you know, and I've just identified one as a learning outcome at random, say whether you feel like you've now understand this particular area. If you get along with the kind of position of calling somebody in the room saying, how was that, did you get that, more often, and that sort of thing as well.
Have you got one of those? You can kind of do that on the
for
them to remain
calm. I used to program in very intentionally. So often I've got a short
obviously you have to educate students to understand the nature of that, because you get them and you start changing and thinking about what you're doing, so you can actually put in so you do have to train the students to engage properly with the teacher content. So you can see benefits.
Or looking ahead to, well, this is what we're going to do next year.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've got about 2 minutes left, I'm afraid. So looking at your sheets in front of you, we won't get time to finish, but I'm going to let you take them away, don't worry. Looking at your sheets in front of you, I'm seeing a lot of green, some yellow, which feels I've done something useful, and 1 or 2 red. So let's just see what the red ones are. What were the red ones that you wouldn't use?
Wait time.
What did you have for red? For wait time? Did you get to wait time? Green. Okay, would these 2 groups, I'd like to explain to this group why you might use wait time, and maybe you might persuade them. Equally, would you like to just tell them why you didn't want to use wait time? So we'll start with positives first. So why did you go green with it?
For me it's a bit more specific because it's ESOL, so TESOL, it's EAP. You've got to give non-native speakers of English some time to process what they've heard. And then to formulate answers, and it takes different speeds for different nationalities depending on how much risk they're willing to take. Okay. So I think they need the wait time for that reason.
And to anybody else who said yes to wait time?
Yeah, giving them time to think
Tell
about giving students time to think about what you've asked them is really important, because some people will get it very quickly and others won't. So if you give them wait time, it's a bit of an equality thing, so you're giving them all time to think about it. It's not about the fast and the slow people. So if that's what the wait time, that's my interpretation of what it is, giving them time to think about what I'm asking them to do.
Yeah, but the reason why I'm just going to come back to you 1 second. Just 2 more to why we were, then we're going to hear why you wouldn't. See if we can persuade you. So
well, I said that my interpretation of what wait time was kind of a little bit to do with the experience, and it's that sort of dreaded thing. You ask a question to a group of students, you get a deafening silence throughout the room, and just as you go to reframe the question or give the answer yourself, someone starts to speak and then they kind of bottle it because you're speaking again. So I kind of describe it as the kind of almost like the courage to have a pregnant pause after the silence that you give for an answer to the question. So I guess it also achieves the same thing, which is some students take longer to process the answer, but it just, I don't know whether there's some psychology in it in terms of the fact that just for that, I don't know to call it the 3-second rule, but just for those 3 seconds, my body language changes to a point where they feel, especially in large group situations, that they're confident enough to give out an answer.
And you've got yes as well.
Well, yeah, just all very similar things, but I'm just thinking at home with my kids, I go blah 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 blah, and I didn't give them a second to answer, and I'm already then shouting at them. So I suppose just giving them the information to the time rather to process the information.
Okay, and you guys decided not to, all three of you, so why did you decide?
Well, I think we perhaps interpreted it differently.
Okay.
Because we were thinking it was quite a long time while you let the students flounder around. And they may be, and as you say, some students may be much quicker than others, and some may be sitting there with no idea enough at all what to do. So we were preferring the articulate an answer, so getting them to discuss it before we asked them. So I think we interpreted it. We were thinking of a quite significant amount of time rather than a short pause. So I think we interpreted it.
Is that the same for each of you?
Yeah, I think as well for me, certainly the way I've planned my lectures, and you should know I've not actually delivered anything yet, so I might be talking complete rubbish. I want to encourage dialogue rather than necessarily like lots and lots of independent thought, and I'd rather the articulate for me was that you can get them talking in pairs, and then if you have got somebody that's a little bit slower than somebody else, perhaps the other group members can kind of bring them along.
And it's not an either or, to be fair. I do think articulate has a particular strength in terms of confidence, because how many students have been in a class of 30, never one of 250. So give them a chance to practice their answer first so that nobody's going to laugh at them, they've got one worked out, and somebody agrees with them, at least one person in the room. Absolutely. But I think David mentioned it was really important, courage. Having the courage to wait. And it's one of the things, certainly from my own teacher education background, we have students who will set a task, and particularly in something like dance, which is a practical, with Year 9 boys. So you set the task, and then you look around the room and nobody's moving. And to get them to have the courage, and often they're male PE students as well, to have the courage to wait, to give them a chance to get on task and to start talking. And you get about 75% of the room then starts moving, then you can go and target the ones that are struggling a little bit more. But it does take a lot of courage. And you have to be careful to move from teacher intervention, which is important, to teacher interference, which is when you don't give them enough time. So I would challenge you to think about wait time, as you say, you thought about it in a slightly different way.
You can maybe combine the two as well.
Absolutely.
So I've got a couple of activities that I want them to think about their own definition of a particular thing. So I'm going to get them to write down 5 keywords individually that actually they associate with the word that I give them, and then share that together, and then between them come up with that definition. So I suppose you could kind of combine it.
And if you've got to the one about what all you know about, if you've got some of the later ones, you'll probably find that's in there. Okay, we have run out of time, ladies and gentlemen. I hope it's been useful to you. The intention is to share the resources. I do happen to have 7 envelopes, so if you, I'm not going to collect them in to see the greens I've had a quick look at that, so you keep one pack with the stickers on, but if anybody wants a pack to take away, you're very welcome. And if you want to email me, I'll have to send it to you, but I believe everything is going to be made available anyway through the conference, but hopefully that was useful, and any feedback would be gratefully appreciated. Yeah, that's true. You've got 3. Good. You engaged in the learning.
Secondary.